Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Woodpeckers Deep Dive. My name's Jeff Farris. Welcome to the Woodpeckers Model Shop. Today, we're going to take a closer look at Woodpeckers' new Align-A-Saw system. We're going to answer some questions that we've had on our customer service line and that we've seen on social media. Okay, let's get started. Now, the most critical alignment on your table saw is the alignment of the miter gauge slot to the blade. That's what we're going to take a look at today first, and to do that we're going to get rid of the table saw guard just long enough to make this alignment. Now, the critical point here is that we need the distance from the miter gauge slot to the blade to be exactly the same at the front of the blade and the back of the blade. Now, the most common question that we had about our new Align-A-Saw system is, why do you need that? Why not just use the saw blade? Well, we've got a lot of problems in using the saw blade. One, the teeth stick out beyond the plate of the saw. So you can't use the teeth and you have to work around the teeth. And then the other issue is the plates are not as flat as you need them to be to get a truly accurate alignment. And then third thing is, it's just too short a distance. We can measure from here to here. Even though it's a 10-inch blade, we can only use what's above the table, and raised at the full height, we've got maybe 7 or 8 inches between there. When we put on the Align-A-Saw, you'll see we'll have a lot more room. So I'm going to take the saw blade off and put the Align-A-Saw plate on. So check this out. We have a full 12 inches front to back to reference from. There's no teeth in the way, and we're working on a surface that has been ground to a flatness tolerance of 2/1000ths of an inch. Now, once you have the Align-A-Saw plate mounted to your saw, there's lots of ways to measure from the miter slot to the plate. In my opinion, the best one is one of Woodpecker's 2 different saw gauges. We're going to use saw gauge 2.0. So once we have this, we want our plunger to be engaged on the surface of the plate, and we're going to work up at the front, and we're going to make sure it's stable and set the dial to the 0 point. Now we'll just move that to the back. That's about 1/1000th of an inch from one end to the other, and that 1/1000th is this way. It's going positive, which means that the pointer is getting further. And so what that means is it's 1/1000th of an inch this way, which I do mostly ripping on my table saw. So the fact that the back of the blade is, if anything, a tiny bit this way, I look at as a positive rather than a negative, so I am not going to mess with this saw at all. It's just as close to perfect as we can get it. But let's say that's not what we found. Let's say that this was off by more than 5/1000ths of an inch. How are you going to adjust that? Well, it depends on your saw. This is a cabinet saw, meaning that the motor and the trunnion are attached to the cabinet base, and the top is then attached to that separately. In a saw like a cabinet saw, you're going to loosen the bolts that hold the top to the base and adjust the top. The other style, what most people refer to as a contractor saw, the trunnion, the part that allows the blade to pivot, is bolted to the underside of the table top. And there you're going to loosen the 4 bolts that hold the trunnion to the table top. You're going to make your adjustment there. Job site type saws, for the most part, are like a contractor saw. The trunnion and the motor are attached to the table top rather than the cabinet, and so you're going to make that adjustment there. Now we're going to take a look at the other part of the Align-A-Saw system, and that's the Align-A-Saw gauge. Now, the Align-A-Saw gauge is a square that is specifically designed to check table saws. We made it really thin. It's, I believe, 1/16th of an inch thick. And that gives us a reference that when we bring that up to either the Align-A-Saw plate or a saw blade, that thin reference surface makes it really easy to see if things aren't aligned just right. The other thing we did here was for 45s. When you set this to 45, it's really critical that this be perpendicular to the saw blade or the Align-A-Saw plate. And we're going to keep that perpendicular with this little piece right here. This little stand that fits down in the miter track is just the right size for me to drop that in there, and when we bring that up, we're always dead square to our blade. So if we want to check this for square, we're going to drop that in the track, slide it over to the plate, and then inspect it from the side. And it looks like it's just a tiny bit out. Turns out my stop in here is just perfect. Right when I get to the stop, it lines up exactly. So we'll just lock that, and we know we're square. Now, when I first started testing the prototypes of the Align-A-Saw system on both my saw here at the shop and mine at home, I used this setup to reset my stops for 90 and 45 degrees. With the Align-A-Saw plate and the Align-A-Saw gauge, I tweaked those stops until they were just exactly where I wanted them. But for everyday use, sometimes you're going to want to just check to the blade. So let's take a look at that. Now, if I want to check and make sure that the table and blade are square to each other, I can drop the stand in, drop the gauge in, push it up between the teeth and against the plate, and see that it's perfectly square. And one thing I really like on this is if my table insert happens to be a little high, or there's some dust underneath the pins that it rests on and it's up above the table surface, it isn't going to matter because the Align-A-Saw gauge has a cutout there that's going to skip over the table insert. So the Align-A-Saw gauge is a great tool to check the alignment of your saw at both 45 and 90. Now that's available by itself, as is the plate. If you need one or the other, you can get them individually, or you can get the complete set that also includes a wall mountable racket. Hey folks, thanks so much for watching this edition of Woodpeckers Deep Dive. Hope you enjoyed this closer look at our Align-A-Saw system. If you liked the show today, be sure and give us a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. That way you'll know about every one of our videos right when they come out. If you'd like more information about Align-A-Saw, there's a link down below that'll take you to the web page, and one right over here that'll take you to the product video for Align-A-Saw. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time on Woodpeckers Deep Dive.